Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Susbury. I'm the Director of Student Assessment at the Virginia Department of Education, and I'm very happy to have you online with us this morning. Today, we're focusing on science instruction for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And these are the students that are participating in the Virginia Alternate Assessment Program. So we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. And as I said, we're going to be jumping right into the instructional aspect of this information, or really focusing on academic expectations for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And to meet academic expectations, we've got some suggestions for really maximizing that environment for students to be able to learn. And there are three aspects to that we're focusing on. The first one being the academic standards themselves. We refer to these as the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning. I'll talk about those in a little bit. But basically, that's the curriculum or the information or the content that needs to be delivered to these students. And then the second part is the actual delivery of that instruction, or how you're teaching that content to students. And we're going to be talking about that today and giving you some strategies and suggestions. And then the third part of that classroom environment that maximizes the potential for students is the assessment aspect, or really your evaluation of student learning. And that's something that is an ongoing process. It happens before instruction, ideally. It happens during and after instruction. So we're not focused only on the summative assessments or that Virginia Alternate Assessment Program, but also how you're assessing students throughout the year. So today's focus really is going to be on the instructional aspect of this information for you today. The relationship among these three pieces is very important, though, as you go throughout your school year. So we're going to start talking about the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning, and these are the academic content standards that we have in place for reading, mathematics, and science. They are derived from the standards of learning, meaning they're linked to those very closely, but they are reduced in depth, breadth, and also complexity. And that's intentional for this specific population of student. The VESOL were developed by Department of Education staff with a lot of input and work from a number of special educators from 27 different school divisions. And we completed this process in partnership with staff from the University of Oregon. We borrowed their process of essentialization, and that was that process that we went through to link the VESOL to the standards of learning as the basis for the content. So we have VESOL in reading and math that are available at grades 3 through 8 and high school. And then we also have VESOL for science that are available at grades 5, 8, and high school. And I want to be very specific here when I'm talking about the grade levels, in that these are the grade levels in which this content is assessed. It doesn't mean that that's the only grade level in which the instruction occurs. So it's important that you realize, as I've got here on the slide, that the grade 5 VESOL are taught in both grades 4 and 5, and then they are assessed at grade 5. And then in a similar fashion, the grade 8 VESOL are taught at grades 6, 7, and 8. That's a cumulative assessment that is administered at grade 8. So by no means do we expect or think that you would instruct all of that content, provide instruction for that at only grade 8. So it's important that science instruction is happening annually for students, even though it's only assessed from a state perspective at grades 5, 8, and high school. Now the VESOL are available on the VAP website, and that's on the Virginia Department of Education website. Okay, and then as you look at this calendar of modules that have occurred, you realize today is the last session that we're having. We are recording today's session, and we have recorded the previous ones. A version of this will be posted on the Department of Education's website. So you'll be able to have access to that and also share it with colleagues. We know that some of you may have participated in the Module 1 session. We are working to get that Module 1 recording posted as well. So both of these will be available to you, Module 1 and then this current Module 2. In addition, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint slides by email to all registered participants. And then as a teaser, coming soon, we have sessions that will focus on reading and mathematics as well. So those will be coming a little bit later this fall. So just for some logistics today, we hope that you'll focus your attention on what's being presented, and you can save your questions for the end of the presentation. There will be time for us to answer those at that point. You have a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen that you can use to do that. And as I've mentioned, this module is being recorded and will be available online later this week, we hope, but soon, definitely. And then the last part is we have had many hundreds of people participate in this session. So based on that number of participants, we're not able to provide individual certificates of participation. So let's get back to the focus of today's webinar. This really is designed to support teachers in science instruction. For those of you that are delivering instruction on the VESOL content. So one of the first things that will be addressed is unpacking the science VESOL for classroom instruction. Really getting to what needs to be addressed out of each of those VESOLs in that document and a process for doing that. And then the other part is providing some very interesting instruction for your students. We find that science is usually engaging to students. It brings some fun activities, some meaningful and relevant information for them to their everyday experiences. And it can serve as a very highly engaging topic for them. So we want this to be something that you can have some success with your students. Some of the strategies that will be presented today include using embedded vocabulary development and inquiry strategies. And then you'll also hear a little bit about assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication supports. So another piece that we want to acknowledge is that we understand that many of you are teaching students at different grade levels. So it's not that your classroom is limited to a particular grade level of instruction. So along those lines, we're hoping that some introductions to thematic instruction may be useful to you. And you may be doing some of this already in your classroom. We definitely want to give you some ideas for how to do that in science. And so by focusing on multiple grade levels and content areas of the VESOL at one time, we hope to help you be a little bit more efficient in your work. And then the last part of today's session will be an opportunity to answer your questions. We have a couple of frequently asked questions that are part of the webinar, and then we'll work to address any questions that you submit to us during the session today. So at this time, I'm going to acknowledge first that I have a number of staff online with us this morning to assist with questions. Some from the Virginia Department of Education, and Karen Berlin is here from George Mason University from the Training and Technical Assistance Center. And she's going to be presenting next, and I'm going to turn this over to Karen.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm just really pleased that you have made the choice to spend your Monday morning with us and engage in learning about teaching science to students with significant cognitive disabilities. So can't think of a better way to start the week. So let's get started. Whenever we're thinking about these VESOL, the first place that we want to start is unpacking the VESOL. So we're going to take a look at unpacking the science VESOL for instruction. The thing that's really great that I hope that you'll see as you look at this table is that science really lends itself to multiple grade instruction. Sarah shared this with you, that though the science VESOL are tested in grades 5, 8, and high school, the science instruction is provided in all grades. And you can see how this goes across, how the curriculum spirals across the grade levels. There's great vertical alignment in these reporting categories. We can see living systems goes the whole way across, earth and space systems, ecosystems goes the whole way across, and then our focus on force, motion, energy, and matter. So this really does lend itself to sequential spiraling instruction, and it just so happens that there are assessments in grades 5, 8, and high school. So whenever we are looking at a VESOL, we start with the complexity continuum. So throughout the course of our time together this morning, we wanted to use different grade levels as examples to make sure that we're conveying how this works across all school experience. So we're going to start with Science High School number 2. And the first step in unpacking this VESOL is to read this complexity continuum. And particularly in science, the complexity continuum is your go-to place to understand what students are expected to know, understand, and do. The range of concepts that are listed in the complexity continuum gives you a pretty good idea of what needs to be taught. So in this one, the student will recognize that plants need light, air, and water to grow and create energy through photosynthesis. That's the VESOL. Well, the complexity continuum tells us that the range of things that students may need to know and do with this VESOL are recognizing the difference between light, air, and water, and understanding that plants need those three things to grow. 2, really understanding the role of photosynthesis and being able to compare the difference in amounts of water, light, and air, and how that impacts plant growth. To finally, the complexity continuum really getting into understanding the components of photosynthesis, the inputs, the water, the sunlight, the carbon dioxide, and the outputs, the oxygen and sugar. So there's a great breadth of what this VESOL can cover for different students. But before teachers can begin to plan their instruction, we have to make sure we really understand what the concepts are so that we can teach them. So there will be some occasions where, even though this is really laid out for you as far as the complexity continuum, that you're going to want to unpack that VESOL a little bit further. So let's take a look at that process. How do we unpack a VESOL? So the question that we're asking is, what is this VESOL about? What is this science VESOL about? The Council on Exceptional Children, CEC, has provided this really great guidance list of questions to help educators unpack standards. So the 3 big questions you always want to be able to answer: what do my students need to know, understand, and do? When I can answer those, I know what they need to know, I know what they need to understand, and I know what they need to do. Then I'm ready to begin to plan instruction. If I've got any doubt or confusion, or things are a little muddy, it's not quite clear, then I want to unpack that a little bit further. So with this high school VESOL on photosynthesis, it may be that I want to develop my understanding of that concept, of that process, a little bit better myself. So where do I go? The first place that we're always going to send you is to your general education colleagues. Not at all because they know more than you, but precisely because they have a long term of experience in teaching this content. So based on their teaching experience, you can consult with them to get a deeper understanding of the VESOL and learn about possible learning activities and things that help teach that VESOL. So we want to always remember that the VESOL are derived from the SOL. And so the SOL, all the resources that are available to support the SOL also support the VESOL. So those people who are experienced in teaching the SOL content are going to be really great to go to, because you can actually have a conversation. You're not just reading material. As you get some information, you can ask a follow-up question or seek clarification or ask how they teach that. But in addition to your general education colleagues, because we are aware of reality, and we know that you would love to collaborate all the time. You would love to be planning with general education teachers, but time is often a barrier, and finding that common time for those conversations or opportunity to really pursue the answers to the questions that you need answers to can be a challenge. So in addition to your general education colleagues, you've got these great online 24/7 resources that you can go to. When you receive the PowerPoint, all of these resources will be hyperlinked that you can click right on them. This first one is to a TTAC online resource, which is a crosswalk. And the VESOL crosswalk will connect you to all the available educational resources around that VESOL. So absolutely, it's going to connect you to the SOL. And the VAT manual, this SOL is actually listed right there in the VAT manual. You don't have to go to the crosswalk to find it. But in the crosswalk that's on TTAC Online, there are hyperlinks that will take you right there. And then you can connect to all the resources for that SOL as well. So the TTAC Online crosswalk is going to connect you to the SOLs. It's going to connect you to the retired ASOLs. This is probably only of interest to veteran teachers who were around when we used the aligned standards of learning. But if that's you, and you have a frame of reference with the aligned standards of learning, that's going to connect you to all of the resources and supports that were for photosynthesis in the ASOLs. And it also connects to the applied studies competencies to help make sure that you are planning instruction that is meaningful and relevant in daily routines and daily activities. So you've got that crosswalk. Then on the DOE site, you've got everything that is available to support science instruction of that SOL. So you have all the activities, all the resources, and the access to the curriculum framework. And the curriculum framework is the tool that VDOE has developed that is designed exactly for what you want to do when you want to unpack that VESOL. It gives you the essential understandings, the associated prerequisite skills, and it lists out that vertical alignment of what information comes before and what's going to follow that particular standard. So when you run into a situation where you do want to unpack a VESOL, we suggest you go through this process. And again, on TTAC Online, you'll find this template. It's called Unpacking the VESOL, and it's really, when you download it, it's just a Word document for you to use. It's a guidance tool that these questions appear as the headers in the table, and it allows you to answer those questions. And if you choose to use it, then you can document your answers so that before you begin to plan your instruction, you really have a good, solid understanding of what do I need to teach, because what do my students need to know, understand, and do. So you can see how we unpack this photosynthesis VESOL. We know that this is what students need to understand, what plants need, photosynthesis, and about amounts of air and water and light. What do they need to do? These verbs are important: recognize, compare, what they need to do with the parts of plants and their functions. This is going to really help us understand what we need to teach. By using those documents, I can look at the SOLs that were listed as prerequisites and match that to the other science VESOL that connect with this photosynthesis, VESOL. I can get an idea of what are some of the representations that could be used. This is another place where talking with your general education colleagues can inform you about what do teachers use to teach this? What kind of concrete representations can be used? And then what is the vocabulary that might be associated with teaching this VESOL? So this is not something that you're going to need to do for every science VESOL that you teach. The complexity continuum may give you all the information that you need. But in those instances where you need to dig deeper, we wanted to make sure that you knew the process for doing that and have the tools to do so. So once we've got our VESOL unpacked, we're sure we've got a really clear understanding of what students need to know, understand, and do so that we can teach. We move on into planning our science instruction. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of demystify, kind of bust some myths. There are some myths around science instruction for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And too often, science instruction has not been prioritized for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And it's because of some of these perpetuated myths, including that investigative science instruction is not appropriate for students with significant cognitive disabilities. They're at such a concrete level that they can't do investigative learning, that students who don't communicate verbally cannot possibly comprehend these abstract science concepts and processes. They don't have the vocabulary around them to understand them. There's a misperception, a myth that science instruction for this population should only be offered as enrichment, not core instruction, because there's so much in that core instruction they have to learn. There's no time for science. It's a myth to think that it's impossible to teach science at multiple grade levels. There's a capacity issue that people feel like it's too much content. There's no way. And then finally, there's a myth that there aren't science materials, that there aren't instructional activities for this population. So I could challenge all of these myths, but instead we're going to let a picture be worth 1,000 words. And we have a short video that we're going to have you watch to think about this idea of science instruction for these students.
Educators sometimes ask, why would we teach science to students with developmental disabilities, especially those who may have moderate and severe developmental disabilities?
Would you like to go first? Yeah. Let's see.
One aspect of science is that it tells us the how and the why of a lot of the activities in our daily lives. How do you keep a plant alive? Why do we recycle?
Show me which one changed. Nice work.
And through science, we teach those how and why behind those activities of daily living.
We're going to talk about this butterfly's life cycle. What did it start out as?
A baby.
A caterpillar.
Say egg.
Egg.
What do we see happening, Jojo?
Changes.
But the other part of science that I really like is that it teaches us to be aware of and engaged with our natural world. It gives us that sense of wonder.
See and feel the shape of the moon. The moon is round. Can you feel our round moon yet?
To notice that the phases of the moon are changing.
Round. Do you see that?
It helps the child look around and notice that a flower's coming into bloom. Maybe while playing in the backyard, look at two different rocks and start wondering about why they're different. Promoting that interest in the natural world, that curiosity about the natural world, really gives a student a gift of awareness about all of the patterns and beauty that's in the world around us.
So I hope that that video helps you accept and embrace and be excited about the notion that rigorous science education is essential and appropriate for all. And science really can be one of the most exciting, engaging, anticipated components of the instructional day for you and your students. And we hope that you agree with that, and that those other myths are put to rest, and that you adopt this notion instead. So when we talk about meaningful, relevant, and engaging science instruction, there are some things that make it that way for students. Science instruction really lends itself to hands-on, authentic learning experiences, using the real materials, the real elements that are in the world around them. The more teachers can link VESOL concepts to students' everyday routines and experiences and the things that they do encounter in their day-to-day lives, the more practice and generalization opportunities they're going to have. Science instruction crosses all grades, and it teaches that process of inquiry. Sometimes our students can fall into a pattern of passive or just rote responding. Science really gives students the opportunity to engage in I wonder, to notice, to think about, to be curious. They have questions. They may wonder about things. It's fun for them to be able to have practice making predictions and learning from their results. So all of these bullets that are included on this slide are things that are important for the instruction that you're providing to be meaningful, relevant, and engaging. So let's take a look at another VESOL. If you remember, we started with high school. Now we're going to take a look at a 5th grade VESOL, and it's in the Earth Space Systems and Earth Resources reporting category. And when we take a look at this VESOL, it states that students will recognize different types of weather conditions and their characteristics. We take a look at that complexity continuum. We can see that it ranges from recognizing simple weather conditions like rainy, cloudy, sunny, foggy, things that are in the weather, thunder and lightning, to connecting the conditions to the weather conditions, like rain means it's going to be wet, sunny means it's going to be dry or hot, a thunderstorm means there's going to be lightning, to finally understanding, identifying those more complex storm conditions, things like a hurricane or a tornado or a blizzard. So we're going to be thinking about this VESOL. I'm going to be teaching different types of weather conditions and their characteristics to my class. First thing I want to think about is, how am I going to introduce the lesson? How am I going to hook my students? How am I going to get their interest? And we want to think about things that are familiar to them and make those connections. So what might be a real world problem? Well, it might be like, what am I going to wear today? Or what am I going to take with me today? And just making it fun, making it a mystery. The teacher might have a gym bag or suitcase and have some different things in there and I wonder what I should take today. I wonder what the weather is going to be like. Starting the lesson with some type of activity that piques curiosity. If the teacher puts on their sunglasses and asks, do I need this today? But an opportunity for the students to respond and hook their interest. We also want to think about the science vocabulary that is going to be a part of the instruction. So we want to make sure, as we're planning our instruction, that we're really thinking about the different communication systems that students use in our classrooms. If students are using a real object communication system, we have to pre-think what are going to be the real objects associated with these different weather conditions. Maybe it would be sunglasses for sunny. Maybe it would be an umbrella for rain. Some students will be using photographs, not symbols, but they'll need the actual pictures of the real authentic event. And then some students may be using communication symbols and some students will be using words. But as we are thinking about our planning for this instruction, we want to make that real world connection, think about what kind of hook we can have to engage our students' interest, and be considering their communication system so that as we introduce it, they're able to understand both receptively and have an opportunity to express what they know about the concepts. When we think about this vocabulary instruction and the myths that are sometimes associated around science instruction, sometimes there's a myth that teaching science is really just teaching vocabulary, that we're adding vocabulary words to the students' repertoire. And a point that we want you to walk away with today is vocabulary instruction is a part of science instruction, but it is not the end goal. The vocabulary, learning the vocabulary supports the understanding of the concepts because it starts to attach words or symbols to the concept students are learning. But we want to embed the vocabulary instruction. Notice the header on this slide. This is a piece of what we are planning. So vocabulary instruction is best when it's supported as an ongoing activity. And one of the things that we want to draw a little bit of special attention around is this core vocabulary. And again, this is going to be linked in the slides that you receive. But core vocabulary are those words that can be practiced and reinforced across all content areas. Sometimes when we think about teaching science vocabulary, we're thinking it's all those new words like tornado or hurricane or photosynthesis. And absolutely, those are words that are going to be taught, but we want to make sure that when we're talking about vocabulary instruction, we're really focusing on practicing and increasing use of those core words. So what is core vocabulary? What am I talking about? Well, what we've discovered is about 85% of the English language is actually comprised of 250 to 350 words. If you were tracking everything that I was saying, you would find that there are some words that are used over and over and over again, like the word over. Core vocabulary is that relatively small set of words that have been determined to be useful in communicating across all domains and lots of different settings. So some examples of those words are things like more, stop, go, off, on, up, some, words that describe quantities, different concepts. So as we're thinking about embedding vocabulary, we want to think about those opportunities for core vocabulary use. And on this core vocabulary website, you'll find a list of 40 words that have been determined to be the most important words for students to use. So as we're planning our instruction, we want to think both how can we embed that vocabulary instruction for those new science words and embed practice opportunities for core vocabulary. Some ways that some evidence-based practices that are strategies that are available for vocabulary instruction are things like personal dictionaries, where students are building their own dictionary and adding the words and the representations that are used in their communication system into their own dictionary that they keep on their desk that they can refer to. Another evidence-based practice is keeping vocab books for each content area. So instead of just a regular catch-all dictionary, it might be their science vocabulary book. And so prior to the inquiry, there might be some explicit vocabulary instruction, teaching the word, showing multiple examples of the word, before asking students to engage in using the word in the instruction. Other strategies include word walls, where the words are visible at all times for students to see, flashcards, and matching activities, just really increasing the exposure and the practice opportunities and the opportunities to respond around the science vocabulary that's used in the VESOL. So all those words that we talked about, sunny, foggy, rainy, thunderstorm, we want to think about how are we going to pre-teach some of that vocabulary to increase the students' understanding when we get into the investigation. And the other thing that we want to think about that I've been talking about is embedding those alternative and augmentative communication supports. So whatever communication representations students are using that are already in their communication system, that's what you want to be using as you provide this instruction. For those that are not already in their communication system, you want to make sure that the representation you use matches what they understand. So we talked about something wet for rain might be like a sponge. If we're teaching cold, it might be a freezer pack or an ice cube. If we're teaching hot, maybe a sock from the dryer. But what representation is going to be used to attach meaning to the word? When it comes to image selection, some students are okay with abstract representations like drawings and symbols, but a lot of our students are going to need those actual photographs or short videos, media representations to click and see. There's lots of different specific topic boards that can be created, whether it's low tech, mid tech, or high tech, where you can put all that vocabulary for the student to access that's relevant to a particular lesson. So we want to we want to be explicit. We want to plan that vocabulary instruction, but I want you to remember it's a part of the instruction. So this next little video is going to show you a sample of the formative assessment. So with this weather lesson, we know there's some vocabulary around it that we looked at, those descriptive words, the foggy, rainy, sunny. We're going to want to do some teaching around that, whether it is matching activities, the dictionary. We're going to give some pre-exposure, and then we're going to move on. Unfortunately, we were not able to locate a video that provided a demonstration of vocabulary instruction or assessment for weather. But we do have a sample of what the vocabulary piece of the science instruction and that formative assessment might look like. So we're asking you to just make a little shift in your mind. This is still science, but this formative assessment is going to be more around a chemistry VESOL, where we're looking at things like solutions and solvents.
Can you point to the picture of solution? Good job. Okay. Can you match the word to the picture? Solution. Can you say it?
Solution.
Good job, Leisha. You did a great job. Okay. Hunter.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see what we can do here.
Okay.
Can you point to the word, the picture for solvent?
Yes. Okay.
Solvent. Good job. Good job. Solvent. Okay. Let me take your hand off so I can mix them up.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you match the word to the picture?
Here we go.
Good job. What word is it?
Solvent.
All right, so what I want you to think about is what we know from that formative assessment is students can match, or they're in the process of learning to match a word to a representation. So we know that they can match, but we don't know that they really understand the concept, that they have had any experience with the difference between solvents and solutions. So we want to make sure that everyone understands that it's like hand in glove. there's the vocabulary instruction, but there's also the investigative inquiry that's necessary to really have authentic experience with the concept and learn the science. Absolutely. Explicit and systematic vocabulary instruction is a regularly occurring component of effective science instruction. And we need students to increase their knowledge and skills around this vocabulary because the vocabulary describes the concepts. But we also have to move forward in teaching and giving authentic engagement with the concepts themselves. So how do we do that? How do we provide these authentic learning experiences? So switching back to this VESOL that we have on weather, the more authentic the learning experience, the more students are going to learn. So what are some things that students can do that are authentic learning experiences? Well, they can recognize and identify the actual weather conditions that they're experiencing each day, creating a weather and conditions chart. And having that be a part of your daily routine where students are identifying the weather conditions is a way to keep on giving continued opportunities to respond, review, and exposure throughout the entire year. Recording and visually displaying the weather conditions each day, inviting the students to watch the weather news with their families and record what the weather forecast was supposed to be, and then coming to school with that forecast and saying, was that forecast right or wrong? Do the weather conditions match? Students can look up the weather conditions on the computer as a forecast and then make a hypothesis. Is it going to happen? And test what is that weather condition. They can share what they learned based on their predictions, and they can create weather books, dictionaries, do lots of matching activities. We want to embed these opportunities to make it real, not just during the science instruction, but throughout the course of the student's day. Lots of opportunities for family connection and opportunities to practice at home as well. Then we want to engage in the actual scientific inquiry and research. We want our students to actually be scientists. So as with this Science VESOL about weather, it lends itself to, I wonder what the weather will be like tomorrow. I wonder if I should take an umbrella. I'm going on a trip. I wonder what I should pack. What would I take here if the conditions were? So all of these questions provide that real world practice in making predictions, examining evidence, and determining if the hypotheses were correct or not. It also provides an authentic example that science is a process of inquiry about what we don't know, not always about being right or wrong. So some things students could do for inquiry around weather: they could place a thermometer outside and go and record their weather observations. They can predict what the weather is going to be like the next day based on the temperature and conditions of the current day. They can do research on websites, looking at videos, investigating books. There are activities on TTAC Online, such as the weather in a jar, where they can create simulated storms in a jar, a blizzard or a tornado or a volcano, not a volcano, a blizzard, tornado, or hurricane. But there's all kinds of authentic inquiry and research that students can do. As they're doing this, again, we want to make sure that we're embedding those assistive technology supports. Assistive technology is very individualized, and the decisions based on many factors. We want to make sure you know that this VESOL AT and AAC resource is on TTAC Online and will help do more of that explicit specific matching. But we want to be thinking about options for access for students to be able to tell us what they know, ask questions about what they don't know. So things like a touch screen, adapted mice and keyboards, an eye gaze frame, recordable switches with built-in scanning. All of these can help students increase access so they can fully participate in both the inquiry and the research. This video is going to take us back then to that same group. So we're switching from weather again to the chemistry for the visual example. But we saw the vocabulary portion of the lesson. But I want you to think about how much deeper and richer and meaningful that learning is around those words with this experiment. And so I'm going to show it from here because I think you'll see it a little better.
Okay. Stir it up. Do you see anything happening?
No. No.
Any kind of reaction?
No. I do some little stuff in there.
A little bit of stuff in there? Yeah. Changing color, kind of like our solution when we did solutions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's try one more and see if anything happens.
Oh.
This is the baking soda.
Oh man.
Oh man, this is getting really cool. I said explode.
Randy, you ready for this one?
Yeah.
Okay. The cup with the B. Where's your cup with the B, Hunter?
Holy snap. Holy snap.
Anthony, can you sit down, please? Where's the B?
This is so cool.
You want some more? Yeah. Oh. Okay, so is anything happening when you're stirring that one up?
Yeah,
Yes.
explode.
Okay.
So I hope that you noticed that the engagement, the authentic reactions of the students, being involved in the experimentation, actually noticing the differences. The vocabulary supported that learning experience for the students, that now they can put that together around that solvent and solution vocabulary. And that's what we want to make sure that everyone understands, is that though the VESOL may say recognize, and that may lead you to conclude like my students just need to learn this word or be able to match this, the real instruction, the real learning is going to take place as they have authentic experiences with those concepts. So thinking again about this, we're going back to our weather, our VESOL Science 5. We've had that hook, we've looked at the vocabulary, we've explicitly taught the vocabulary, we have supported that with real authentic inquiry and research. We've embedded it in our daily routines and have thought about authentic ways to build practice on that VESOL in functional routines and everyday activities. We want to think about our opportunities for students to retain what they learn over the course of time and to generalize that learning. So general educators can provide a wealth of resources and ideas. Just remember that this is a mutual exchange. It's not just you run into the general educators. Often general education teachers see the resources that are used to support the VESOL instruction, and they want to use them with their students too. Partnering with your families as students are learning these science concepts really extends the practice opportunities for the students. So be sure to share what you're doing in the classroom and give opportunities for families to be involved for some of the carryover at home. We want to make sure, one of the questions that we often get is, how do we have our students remember all this, since the VAP is a summative assessment? And they might learn, we might be doing weather in the early part of the school year in the fall, and then they're going to be assessed in the spring. This list just offers ways that you can embed review and practice opportunities on the weather science VESOL as the year goes on. So recognizing different types of weather conditions every morning, make that part of your school routine. Asking them if you're watching something, you're watching a social studies or a history movie, or you're reading a story, asking students to identify the weather conditions that are in that literature or in that movie. Having students look at travel brochures, or if you're studying other lands and other places as part of social studies, have them identify the weather conditions in those pictures. Always ask them when they come in from outside how it looked, how it sounded, how it felt, like get them to use that vocabulary. And sorry about that. Keep those questions in mind about what kinds of clothing or accessories students might be needing to use given different weather conditions. So lots of practice opportunities across the days and the weeks and the months so that they can know and remember. Remember that there are lots and lots of resources on TTAC Online. The sample activities, weather was part of the aligned standards of learning, so you still have access to all of these resources that were associated with the ASOL. There are sample activities that have been posted that connect to the range, the complexity continuum for the VESOL. And as I mentioned, you have all this crosswalk information. So that helps us. We unpacked a VESOL, unpacked that photosynthesis high school VESOL. We've kind of gone through the instructional design process for a particular 5th grade science VESOL. Now we want to move into the big question everybody asks: how do I address multiple VESOL and multiple grade levels? And because that is the reality that a lot of people have in their classrooms. And the good news is we have an answer to that question. And the answer that we recommend is thematic instruction. So what do we mean by thematic instruction? That thematic instruction is a way of structuring your instruction. It's organizing your curriculum and your instruction around a central theme. And by doing that, you get to engage learners through high interest topics. The theme is something of interest to them. You get to offer meaningful and relevant learning context because the theme is something that is familiar, that's occurring in the real world. Thematic instruction allows you to connect to their prior knowledge and real life experience. It really lends itself to aligned and integrated instruction. We're going to show you how you can map and integrate multiple VESOL under a singular theme. It provides learning opportunities in multiple domains. The one thing that's really great is it promotes authentic communication and literacy skills. You get to embed formative assessment. Hold on. So sorry. And review. And you get to expand your collaboration. And we talked a little bit about enhancing family engagement. So all of these things that are true about thematic instruction are listed as where the research came from. So thematic instruction has been around for a long, long time. But why are we recommending it for VESOL? Well, the reason thematic instruction is so supportive of VESOL instruction is it allows you to address multiple VESOL across multiple domains. You can be simultaneously teaching science, reading, and mathematics. And as we looked at those reporting categories, you can use the vertical articulation and spiral your instruction across grade levels. The thing that we love best is there are increased opportunities to respond to all the VESOL, not just a particular content area. And you've got lots of naturally occurring review opportunities for the material that was previously learned. So take a look at, we've done high school, we've done 5th grade, now we're going to look at middle school, we're going to look at 8th grade. So on the right-hand column of this table, you see all of the science VESOL for 8th grade are listed. This information in the left-hand column of the table is a sample. This is the way that we at the TTAC organized these VESOL into certain thematic topics, certain themes or units that could be the foundation for thematic instruction in which these VESOL could be taught. So this is a sample list. You might structure it differently, you might organize it differently, but the first step in thematic instruction is generating your topics. So the thing that's great about science is it really lends itself to thematic instruction. These are great themes. These are meaningful, relevant themes that students are familiar with, but under these themes, we can teach multiple VESOL. So we're going to choose VESOL Science 8th grade, number 1. One's a good place to start. And it's about the solar system. Recognize and compare objects in the solar system and their features. So the solar system really lends itself to be a great unit. As we read this VESOL, we want to consider how this particular VESOL connects to other VESOL, both in science and in reading and mathematics, and other grade level VESOL. So let's take a look. If we're thinking, okay, that solar system, I think I could do a unit on that. Let's take a look at how we do that. So first thing we do is take a look at science VESOL connections across grades. So remember, I said we were starting with 8th grade, but wow, take a look at this. This is the science 5th grade, number 5 VESOL, and science 5th grade, number 6 VESOL. Recognize and compare objects in the solar system and their features. Recognize the relationships between the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. Can you see the rich opportunity to really engage in meaningful instruction instead of teaching one VESOL at a time? If I did happen to have a class where I had 5th through 8th graders in my class, I could really combine and integrate this instruction. Identifying the connections to the science VESOL at other grades not only helps teachers identify and plan for that vertical articulation of skills, but it does enable you to address multiple grade levels. Sarah talked at the beginning about that we test in 5th and 8th grade. 6th and 7th grade is going to be providing instruction for 8th grade. 5th grade is preparing for that 8th grade. So we can see right away, okay, we've got great vertical articulation for this solar system unit. When I look at the same grade, remember we are in 8th grade science, solar system, how does it connect to the the reading VESOL? Well, under nonfiction text, the students are going to understand the meaning of words in nonfiction passages that are read to students or that students read. The student will answer questions about a nonfiction text that is read to the students or that the student reads. So if I'm using print material, if I'm using books and texts and pictures to teach about my solar system VESOL, I'm definitely going to be able to connect to my reading VESOL. The thing that is really exciting about reading connections across the grades, this is one of my favorite slides, but take a look at this. The demonstrate comprehension of nonfiction text is a reading VESOL at every grade level. So understanding the meaning of words and passages that are read to the student or that the student reads, answering comprehension questions about nonfiction text, that is something that no matter what grade level a student is in, you can connect that reading instruction to your science instruction. One thing that we want to remind you of is that AIM Virginia provides accessible instructional materials to eligible K through 12 students in Virginia who have an IEP and are unable to access traditional print. So when you're thinking about those reading VESOL, and sometimes with the students in this 1%, in our very diverse population in that 1%, there are sometimes questions about accessing print materials. So we want to make sure that you are aware that AIM is there and you can contact them for your students. So designing instruction that maximizes the use of each student's preferred communication system, and recognizing that the same VESOL crosses all grades, you've got rich opportunities through science to provide practice opportunities and review in these reading comprehension VESOL. So we also want to think about our alignment of our instruction. So we can see if we were doing an instructional unit on the solar system, we can connect to grade 5. If we have mixed grades in our classroom and not just grade 8, it does require some initial planning, and you have to take the time to look at all these VESOL and kind of map them out and align them. But the thematic approach actually saves teachers time because you're able to address multiple VESOL simultaneously. It's easy to integrate these skills for meaningful and relevant instruction. And the students make greater connections. The learning has more meaning when it's integrated within a larger context, as opposed to being taught as a splinter skill in isolation. So we hope that you're starting to see some of the rich opportunities that science provides for making these connections. The other great thing is for teachers is time, right? Like we've got these students who need a lot of individualized supports, and it's hard to have time to make everything that they need. Thematic instruction allows the same visual supports and learning materials to be used to support multiple VESOL. Matching activities such as this booklet with word choices and pictures can be used as a vocabulary development learning activity, as well as a science formative assessment or learning activity. So we could see that these could be easily changed. You create a book like this with the Velcro, you can change the symbols, whether it's real photographs and the words, but creating different matching practice activities can be used across multiple content areas. This is another rendition of a similar type of instructional material that can be used across VESOL, but this is a cookie sheet with magnets, or you could have Velcro on there, but it's the same idea. Students can have, this can be independent practice, it could be group practice. A lot of these learning activities can be used to fortify some of the students' IEP goals, such as social skills, interacting with peers, or taking turns. But if you're working on your reading and your science together, you have a lot more opportunities for each student to respond, to practice and review. Multiple grade and integrated content can be addressed through lots of engaging learning activities and group activities like bingo. Beyond addressing the science concepts and reading comprehension questions about nonfiction text, I mentioned you can be working on increasing attention to task, taking turns, participating in a social group. All of these things through your thematic instruction anchored to science can provide opportunities for reading as well. So you've got your instructional materials, and then you've got your formative assessment. You can use the same materials for multiple grade formative assessment by using the same 3-panel selection to kind of choice board for students to practice multiple choice, making a selection. By changing out what's included, you can use it for your science and or for your reading assessment. The same question can be posed with different picture choices to represent the complexity continuum. And in this solar system one, what could be pictured here could range from unrelated objects on Earth to other objects in the solar system, so that the same materials could be used for multiple students and multiple content. We want to make sure that we're always thinking about that AT and AAC across VESOL and grades. So there's lots of opportunities for embedding assistive technology and AAC supports. The example on this slide shows the alignment between reading high school and Science 5. So we're showing you the multiple grade levels in multiple different opportunities, but this eye gaze selection board is one way to embed some of the AT, and the spreading out of the choices, so cutting them up and putting them in different places for students, can be some of that AAC or AT support that you embed in your instruction and in your assessment. So we talked about reading. Thematic units are not just about aligning reading and science. We also can align math, so that align mathematics and science VESOL can take place at the same grade and across multiple grades. So remembering our solar system, our S55 and S81, both of those were around the solar system, recognizing and comparing objects in the solar system and their features. We can look at math. In 5th grade, the student will identify the geometric shape of a given object. Wouldn't that make a lot more sense for a student if that geometric shape was attached to a real world object or something with meaning, like the planets I'm learning about in science or the sun? On this next slide, you'll see a sample list. This is not all of them, but we just wanted to show you good news. There's a VESOL at every grade level that connects to a solar system unit. We made the connection with geometry around shapes, but you can see that if I was choosing to do this solar system unit instruction, I would be able to address multiple reading VESOL, multiple science VESOL, not just at the same grade, but across multiple grade levels. So kind of putting it all together, if you think about where we've been together today, we started with unpacking the VESOL, putting that pause in there, just taking a moment to make sure that as a teacher, I really understand the VESOL. Where do I go to get information if I don't know? I go to my general education colleagues. I go to all those great resources at VDOE and TTAC Online. Then we thought about designing instruction. I've got to make sure it's meaningful and relevant. I've got that hook. I've got to think about the vocabulary. I've got to think about my students' communication system. And I've got to embed that vocabulary and that AAC, AT consideration to authentically engage my students in real scientific inquiry and research. Really let them experiment and learn. That was exciting. But then I thought about all those other VESOL I have to teach, and how do I do that? And we put it together in the idea of thematic instruction. So if you choose to go that route, what you do is you select your topic, you select your theme, you do that work. That's going to be the place where you invest some time. You've got to map those connections like I showed you today around a solar system unit. What are the reading VESOL that would connect? What are the mathematics VESOL that would connect? I look at the same grade connections and the other grade connections if I have multiple grades in my classroom. I think about those general education inclusion opportunities. When in this unit could my students engage with their same age, typically developing peers around some of this content? Identify those peer learning connections. Think about this real world, these community and daily routine connections. What are the family connections? So all of this is in my planning. Then I'm going to list the VESOL that I'm going to cover. I'm going to get my materials together, the literature, the experiment materials. I'm going to really connect to all those real world experiences to maximize my student engagement. Think about the vocabulary, make sure I've got that, make sure I'm embedding my AT and AAC, and then I get to do the fun work of teaching, assessing, and evaluating. So I hope that this has given you reason to be excited about teaching science. We want to make sure that you don't feel abandoned or that there isn't anything out there for you, there are all kinds of instructional resources on this TTAC Online VESOL resource page, and there are specific resources for science. One of the things that you'll find if you go to TTAC Online is this resource document around media and visual supports and resources that are going to support your visualizing and making real some of these abstract science concepts. Science specific instructional resources are available when you look at these documents, and we're always going to send you to VDOE first because these VESOL come from the SOL, and there's just an abundant wealth of resources for the SOL in science. And finally, we want to make sure that you know that each of you are in a superintendent's region that has a TTAC. And at those TTACs, there are people there that want to support you. So there are lending libraries, there are resources you can check out. The TTACs are organizing communities of practice so that teachers can come together and learn and share with one another. They can answer specific questions. So identify where you are on this map and what might be your TTAC, and reach out to the TTAC if you need further support or want to learn more. And with that, I'm going to, well, I guess I'm going to do a couple of frequently asked questions that we have received already. So I see there are some in the Q&A. So I'll give you a little heads up. This is going to be the time where we respond to your questions that may not have been addressed in the presentation. So as I go through these first two, if you have further questions about the science VESOL, go ahead and add those to the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them. And if we don't have an answer for you now, we'll get back to you. So the first question that we receive often is, where can I find meaningful pictures and symbols to represent VESOL science vocabulary? And that where we just came from in those last slides is the first place that we would send you is to VDOE and look at the science instruction resources. They are plentiful. And while you're maybe thinking, but I don't teach the SOL, I teach the VESOL. The VESOL came from the SOL, and so many of those learning activities and visual supports that support the SOL instruction are going to equally support the VESOL. The TTAC Online, specific to science VESOL resources, are going to give you the resources that are specific to the VESOL. Virginia Learns Science Resources is another VDOE sponsored receptacle for lots of science resources, but these are resources that teachers share. So it's not teachers pay teachers, but it's drawing from your colleagues in the field. STEM for All is a great resource, and they provide lots and lots of visual supports as well as instructional evidence-based practices for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And then Project Core to help you with that vocabulary. What are those 40 words that you're going to want to use in your science instruction for your students? The second question that we get asked frequently is, what strategies support student retention of VESOL that are taught earlier in the school year? And I'm wondering if maybe you could answer this yourselves, having been in the presentation this morning. But the answer is, make all of your instruction as meaningful and relevant as possible. As the more real world connections you're making in the instruction, the more frequent are going to be the generalization opportunities and the practice opportunities. So if it's meaningful, it's probably still occurring after you have closed that unit, after that's finished. So you just carry those practice opportunities forward. We've recommended thematic instruction as a means to do that, because the structure of thematic instruction allows you to proportion your energy and your teaching planning a bit, because you can escalate your instruction on new skills, but you can embed practice opportunities on previously learned skills. So as we move off of the solar system unit and into the plant unit, when we're talking about the sun and the light that the plants need, amazing. I've got this naturally occurring opportunity to review those VESOL around the sun that I had in my solar system unit. So making those connections, that is the investment of the work up front, is aligning the VESOL across grades and across content areas to see those connections, and then just leveraging, maximizing those connections with new instruction and review and practice. Increased opportunities to respond. Did you notice in the science experiment the difference, right, between the vocabulary formative assessment, one student at a time, the wait time while other students are waiting for the teacher to get to them, to all the students engaging in the science experiment? You want to look for increasing those opportunities to respond, having independent practice activities, group activities, games, everything that you can just kind of keep coming back to. Maybe we learned the solar system in the fall, but we're playing bingo in January, and guess what's on there are the planets, right? Like you can keep coming back to those through multiple opportunities to respond. Looking at that vertical articulation and how things spiral across grades. And then I mentioned just maximizing authentic peer connection, both with students with disabilities and typically developing peers, and family engagement, just really trying to identify all the opportunities for the real demonstration of these concepts and skills being learned. So with that, you have been very patient listening to me for a very long time. I'm sorry I had a little coughing spell. I'm sure that wasn't pleasant to listen to, but I'm sure that you'll be relieved for me to turn it over to Sarah.
Take a breath, Karen. You did a great job. Karen was flying solo unexpectedly today. So thank you very much for all of that great information. We've had a few questions that we've been answering individually here. And I do want to assure you that we will be providing these slides that include these examples of these thematic units and provide all of the terrific resources to you. So those will be coming this week, definitely. It's a large file, so we're going to look at what our options are for getting that sent to you, but it will be coming. And then I know there was a question about the curriculum framework. The reference that was made during the presentation, I believe, was to really be able to use the curriculum framework that goes with the standards of learning, and that there is some information there that can be used as well. And Karen, feel free to jump back in on that one if you would like to.
No, you're exactly right, Sarah. I was just looking at the question in the Q&A, and you're right that we did have a curriculum framework that was aligned to the ASOL, but interestingly, it was just pulled from the SOL curriculum framework. So it may have looked like or felt like it was an ASOL curriculum framework, but we want to remember the VESOL are pulled from, they're essentialized from the SOLs. And so in this presentation, what I was referring to is the curriculum framework for the SOL, because those frameworks list out the essential understandings. And really when you're going there is when you want to unpack a standard. So if there is a concept or something within a standard, you would go there to learn more about, well, what was the SOL talking about? It's kind of like backing up. Like here I am with the VESOL that's been essentialized. I look at the SOL, but I'm still not sure. I go to the curriculum framework. That's the deepest, richest resource around that SOL. Again, I think in most cases, you're going to find the complexity continuum is ample for unpacking, understanding the majority of the VESOL. in the TTAC, we actually get more questions around mathematics, VESOL, and unpacking those than we do in reading or science. And so you might want to tune in, for the mathematics module when that comes. But long answer to say that yes, the curriculum framework is the SOL curriculum framework that's associated with the VESOL.
All right, thank you, Karen. Okay, and I think that we've hit just about everything that's come in for questions. So we'll advance to the next slide and just say thank you to all of you for joining this morning. Again, we will be providing the slides and also a recorded version of this. And please stay tuned. We'll be sharing information with directors of special education and division directors of testing regarding the upcoming reading module and upcoming mathematics module. So more instructional information to come. So thanks again for joining this morning. We'll be in touch along the way, and we hope you have a great rest of your week and a terrific school year. Thanks very much, everybody.